What is the anti-retirement movement and how does it relate to an entrepreneurship boom and labor workforce participation? We'll talk about that today on Culture Builder Live. Hey, I'm Chris Wink. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Technically, the news organization with a community of technologists and entrepreneurs. Today on Culture Builder Live, we're talking about an anti-retirement movement and what it means for entrepreneurship and workforce participation in this workforce of ours. To do that, I'm joined by Tina Lorenz. She's a consultant and a coach. She goes by the handle The Renegade Boomer, which is a heck of a title. Tina, thanks for being here.
Oh, thanks, Chris, for having me. I'm really looking forward to our conversation.
Same. So start me off. You have introduced me to the idea of the anti-retirement movement. You tell me, how are you using that phrase? What does it mean? What's anti-retirement?
Yeah, well, absolutely. The anti-retirement movement, in my mind, it just not bending to the rules that we go by, especially here in the US, and every country has their own mandates on this, but what we typically think of retirement time. And I leave this totally open to the interpretation for each individual, but not giving the message out to yourself or to others, or having it inflicted upon you that you must retire into oblivion, into the shadows, into being marginalized. And so that's what I'm all about, is not doing that.
You in our pre-conversation, we're talking a bit about how there's a FIRE movement, early retirement. People we technically work with a handful of younger consultants who have joked with me sometimes that they consider themselves semi-retired in their early 20s because they're trying to build a work-life balance that is very unlike much of what has come before it. So your point is well taken that retirement can mean very different things to very different people. But if we use retirement age broadly, if we're talking about those in and around 65 or older, if we use the classic Social Security definition, just for a working principle, let's run with that idea of retirement age folks who are pushing beyond traditional or at least 20th century boundaries of what it means when they are at the tail end of their working career. And I want to walk through a few examples: entrepreneurship and general labor force participation. Let's talk about entrepreneurship. We have an entrepreneurship boom happening in this country right now during the pandemic. It surprised all of us. It was not what typically happens in economic downturns. How is entrepreneurship playing a part of what you see as the anti-retirement movement? What's the relationship between the two?
Oh, super important relationship, very, very deeply connected, because with being an entrepreneur is also the way to be able to create more of your own future. And yeah, it takes some boldness, it takes some courage, but there's so many that as we're approaching 50 and beyond that are really very well positioned to be able to go into an entrepreneurship mode. This involves so many aspects of how we combat ageism, for example, and why people can't get jobs at a certain point or having a hard time getting jobs, even with labor shortages. And I basically, I could say about myself, well, I've been kind of like early retired since my 40s, but because I've worked for myself for almost always, right? And so it doesn't have to look like traditional retirement mode. And interestingly enough to me, that the Small Business Administration score actually says that 54% of small businesses in the United States are owned by people over 50. They're started by people over 50, even though it's a disproportionate percentage based on the population. And it's just such a great way to go, right?
So in addition to entrepreneurship, which is something that's booming at the moment and has been for the last couple of years, another big economic trend we're talking about as a country is a shrinking labor force. There's a bunch of different contributing factors here, so my economist friends don't holler at me. I know there's several inputs, but one of the inputs was a wave of early retirements that particularly we saw in 2020 and 2021, the height of the pandemic. A lot of people who were close to it said, heck, I'm shoving off. So one conversation we are having is whether we can lure back some of those early retirees. I'm curious what anti-retirement can mean for workforce participation. What has to change to be more accommodating to and retain and continue to engage employers deeper into their 60s and beyond?
Yeah, well, that's where that ism, I call it the most, and many of us call it the most acceptable ism out there, is ageism. And it's a very, very real thing. When AARP did a survey, something like really shocking, 93% of people in the survey believe that they experience or see ageism all around them, and 78% have actually experienced it. And so if you want to, use the word lure people back in, I think you're practically going to have engraved invitations issued on a silver platter for some of the workplaces for what the atmospheric conditions and culture may be for someone who's past 50. And I think there has to be more of a feeling of trust, really cultivating the understanding of the value that the experienced worker, those past 50, can bring to that culture. And what a beautiful thing it is to have the blend across the board of all ages working together and sharing in the wisdom from various perspectives. And so I think that because certainly this is where also entrepreneurism comes in, because if someone who's past 50 thinks, well, I'll go back into the workforce now, I'll go apply for a job, and let's say they're going into a corporate structure, and are they going to be welcomed? Are they going to be marginalized right off the bat? There's all kinds of clever wording and ads, and we're looking for energetic people who have 3 to 5 years experience, this kind of stuff. The secret language of, we really don't want you because of your age, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So in your experience, or in your coaching practice, or in just what you're watching with anti-retirement, or as folks kind of blend different relationship to work later in their careers, what's more important for the employer to offer? Is it more about skills training, or are we really talking more about workplace flexibility? Is it like, do all of these jobs have to be full-time jobs, or is a basket of experienced consultants and contractors who might be later in their career and prefer to do project-based work? Like, what do you picture advising the employer on to be able to work with an age-blended workforce?
I think what you said, flexibility, I think is paramount, because I think most of us that are still interested in contributing in kind of the work mode, but however you want to look at that, tend to be lifelong learners. It's not like one and done. Well, I learned this thing 30 years ago and I'm good, right? I think many of us are continuous learners, and we value that. So I think the training aspect can be of interest. Like, yeah, I want to learn how to do that, or I'm proud of myself now, I know how to use Zoom, or whatever it may be. If someone hasn't, hard to believe at this point that everyone hasn't with Zoom, but
right.
But also I think the flexibility is really going to be paramount, because I think as most of us don't really relish the thought of working 80 hours a week, 60 hours a week, the corporate or culture where it's like, the harder you work, the longer hours, this proves your value to us, and seeing the worth and value that, and possibly a higher level of efficiency that experience brings to the table also, and have that flexibility. I think that would go a long way to having more mature workers want to work in a corporate or business setting outside of their own entrepreneurship.
Are you seeing much the bump in remote work, particularly around professional jobs, play a role with this anti-retirement? What is remote work?
Oh yeah, I think absolutely. I mean, like I said, I've always worked remotely, right? This is how our role, so to speak. But the people I work with, they crave that lifestyle freedom, that flexibility, to be able to blend the two. So I don't really see like, okay, here's work and here's my life, and they're never the two shall meet. It's really kind of a blending that doesn't necessarily mean you're working full time, and it doesn't necessarily mean you're working in a really, exactly between this hour and this hour. It opens that flexibility up, and for being able to have more impact. If you have a message you want to get out to the world, if you're dealing with certain challenges, like my husband, for example, is legally blind, right? And many people have other types of challenges that would make life a lot easier for them if they can work remotely. And I think that it's kind of, the people I deal with, it's kind of everybody's dream, right? That's what the way they would prefer to work from another country, work from another state, have a vacation where you're still able to do your work where you are, that type of thing. And so it's very, very open to each person's individual interpretation. And I think it's here to stay. Absolutely.
Why don't we turn now my last few minutes with you? What is that vision you have for anti-retirement? What does the word mean in the future? What do we mean by retirement?
Right.
What are the acts that the privilege of us get to do, the folks who are able to have these options? What are Are you
Well,
hoping for that?
there's several aspects of that, and I'm glad you mentioned that. Those of us that have the privilege and ability to have these choices, because one of the things I'm working on is a platform that is more inclusive, that isn't just people that have made a lot of money or they've already. I certainly work with those individuals, but I also work with people that are just needing to change gears, that they never saw the vision for themselves of what they could really do. They didn't know how to bring it to life. And I had a domestic violence scenario in my 40s. I was homeless in my 40s. And so I have a special place in my heart for people that have been through that experience, to show that this doesn't have to be the end, that it doesn't have to be how you identify yourself either, as a survivor, right? And so all of these things come together into how I see the anti-retirement movement, that it's not not another dictum of you must retire in this way, or don't retire, or there's something wrong with you. Maybe you want to go to Bali and also get online and do one of your coaching calls while you're there, maybe you just want to sit on the sand and look at the waves, and whatever it means for each person. I want people to have the options. I think it's time to reassess what that word retirement even means. It's like refirement, rewiring, rewriting what your future is, what you want to create for that part of your life. And I think that's what I want to help people see, is that they have those options, because a lot of times, especially in corporate structures, people kind of lose their identity. They became the person they needed to be in that setting. And a lot of times the people I work with and professionals I work with say, like, honestly, I don't even know who I am anymore. Or if you say, well, what brings you joy? And they're kind of like, I don't know. They've just lost touch with that deeper core of who we really are, and that spiritual essence of us that makes us each who we are on earth in our life, our human life experience kind of thing. And so that's one of the things that I want to be able to reach more people with, is how they can peel back those layers and get to the core of what's truly important to you, so that you can live your life in that way for the rest of your life, and not be, I said, Social Security started in 1935. It's time to, where a life expectancy was 60, right? And we're far beyond that now. And it's really time to look at, what does that actually mean? What does that word actually mean?
At the risk of biting off a big topic with just the last, minute or two that we have together, this idea of who gets to retire with choice feels important and highly relevant. And I think I am now thinking and taken by, we've done some reporting on Technically, and I have experienced in my personal life with people at very different ages who are approaching work very differently than what we would have considered normal even a decade ago. And this pandemic has certainly accelerated those trends. Sure. Mixing gig work with personal choices, taking sabbaticals, leaving the job without the next job lined up intentionally to give yourself space. These all seem like they have similar veins to what I hear you talking about with anti-retirement. It is, as we live longer, if you are able to, giving yourself the chance to design a life, which again is a great privilege. Yes. But it sounds like you're hoping that we can extend that kind of thinking broader.
Yes.
And I just wonder, maybe to send us off, does the anti-retirement movement only prove relevant when you're in your 50s and 60s, or are you preaching to a wider choir?
I think it can be wider. I think the people 50 and beyond, the people I work with especially, need this type of support. I'm actually looking at how I can start a platform for a broader range of, and because I think of it more in terms of privilege and opportunities, not just age, right? And so when my early days, I'm a copywriter, freelance copywriter. So I still have copywriting programs, and I teach people how a new skill, how to bring what they've done before and to something they can do now that can remain something that they can do to make money, because there's a whole segment that, hey, I still need to make money just because I'm retirement age, and this is a problem. And so if I can open those doors as well, then I'm going to feel like job well done. It's a job in progress, but it's my calling to do that. And so I see a lot of different facets. There's a lot of different layers to this, for both bringing people into a new view of what they're capable of, and creating transformation and transition for people that have been doing something and want to do something different. There's a lot of different facets to it. And this is my goal with the anti-retirement movement, with being a Renegade Boomer.
I love it. Tina Lorenz, she's the Renegade Boomer. She's a coaching consulting practice. She's also a champion of what she calls the anti-retirement movement. Tina, thanks so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. I really enjoyed our conversation today.
Me as well. We'll see you next time on Conversations Building Better Companies at Culture Builder Live. Thanks, everybody. Bye.